event 6G Summit. Really happy to be with you to provide some viewpoints from Europe on 5G policy and then 6G. I've prepared some slides, so I will share them now. So the road to 6G, so over 5G, of course. So let's start first with the policy framework from the European Commission. So the so-called Digital Decade Strategy that we adopted last year, and also followed up with the policy program that will start soon. So here we have four main areas, so-called cardinal points: skills, secure and high-performing infrastructures, digitalization of business, and government. We are now focusing more on the infrastructure side. Here really, it's not only about telecom and connectivity. That's of course important. So give gigabit for everyone and 5G in all areas, but also things like semiconductors, like cloud and edge infrastructures, high performance computing, these kind of things. In light of this, we updated the 5G targets towards 2030. So in the past, we had 2025 as a major milestone, where we wanted to have progress in mainly urban areas and transport paths. And this we now made more inclusive to cover 5G basically everywhere where people are living, working, meeting, and so on. This has to be seen in light of the so-called Next Generation EU initiative. So it was necessary to support the member states during the COVID crisis. And this was done with a joint EU effort to making available funds, around 900 billion. And it was some criteria that said that 20% at least has to go to digital and 37% to green investments, to have a forward-looking investment agenda. And this looks rather well. So we know a 26% funding for digital in most of the plans, and that's very promising. And then aside that, we also need, of course, then to work together, not only giving funds to the member states, but in some areas that we call multi-country projects. It's very important that we work together. This is microelectronics, cloud, 5G corridors, and others. This also is not only about public funding, it's also about the framework conditions. So this is also then accompanied by key reforms, and that includes also removing barriers to 5G. And we are working on a legislative proposal at the moment to update our rules for the deployment of networks, to find synergies, to ease deployment. So just having a look how it looks like today, that's of course important as a starting point. So these recent figures say 72% is covered by 5G. It doesn't qualify the quality. So that means in principle, at least one operator in 70% for the population, in principle, there is a 5G network. But of course, we have to look a bit closer. We would like to be a bit more ambitious when it comes to mid-band deployments, when it comes to standalone deployments. So this is something that we really expect and that we have to incentivize in the next few years. Spectrum, quite concerning. We're still not there in a number of member states. We're now at 75% and a bit more than 80% for the low band and mid band. 26 gigahertz is a bit more in the moment demand dependent and a bit lower. So when we look at the international comparison, here, of course, you're also very well aware what happens in your country, in Korea, but also in the neighboring countries. And what is important here to see that, of course, is very impressive. Congratulations also to the colleagues from Korea, with already more than 150 or 160,000 5G base stations per population. This is very impressive. It's 313 per 100,000 inhabitants, comparing to figures even in China like 65 or In Europe, we are at 33. So for us, also not bad, considering that we also have low band spectrum, where we also provide a good basic coverage already. And then the next steps are to deploy in upgrading existing sites, but also adding new sites. Here you see a bit this this comparison in terms of spectrum bands. We see that indeed we have in Europe, USA, and China we have low band, and in South Korea, Japan less, and that's of course also explaining why there's more densification happening in Japan and South Korea. And of course also high band is also very important, where USA is ahead in amount of spectrum. But here we still have to see a bit what are the deployments, because it's of course challenging in higher bands to have a good coverage. Good, from 5G to 6G. So it will of course be important to have a good basis in terms of 5G deployment, in terms of ecosystems for 5G, to have a starting point when we come towards the end of this decade, when we expect 6G. In the meantime, we're of course working on developing the technologies for 6G. And as you and many other regions in the world doing, and we also do that to some extent together. So here we have different policy objectives. Of course, we want to enable applications, economic activity, industrial leadership. We have also sustainable development goals, societal issues that we want to advance here. And then, of course, not to forget about sovereignty and some degree of autonomy, of, let's say, not to be too dependent on other regions, and that we somehow master the value chain. That's of course important. That doesn't mean that we want to do everything alone, and certainly there will be partnerships. There will be also then trade and continuing, so that we can concentrate on strengths and specialization. But of course, in the recent context, it's increasingly important also to look at dependencies. So we think a partnership approach, as we had before, but a bit more strategic now in this new context, will be the response to these challenges. And this 6G SNS, Smart Networks and Services Joint Undertaking, that we have launched will be instrumental. We're now already having the phase where we had a bridging phase, already some projects launched under the 5G PPP, and now scaling this up under 6G SNS with 35 projects, around 250 million euros that we just selected and will now be launched. And this gives us some time now to work on the concept of 6G, to look at the technology opportunities, to look at the categories of use cases that we can have in mind, and then shaping this concept or this system approach, and then also the technology building blocks, and then we can move into standardization just after the mid of this decade, and then towards products end of this decade. What do we have in mind when we talk about use cases? So these are, of course, no real use cases by 2030. We can't know the use cases. It's about categories or possibilities or options that we have in mind when we design a technology. We're now on Zoom, or I'm recording here on Zoom. We have virtual conferences. We now, since COVID, we're very much used to that. But I probably agree that in 2030 we don't imagine to be like that together. We will have something much more immersive and some much more advanced experiences with telepresence. So that will be certainly an interesting use case. Then industrial use cases like cloud-based robots that we want to synchronize. We have to move ahead. Or in 5G, we have possibilities for smart manufacturing, but we are, of course, also looking at then more real-time and having possibilities for cobots, like robots that can work together with humans, where we're really sure that everything is done in real time and is secure and safe. Massive twinning, maybe one other one here to mention. So that's of course also opportunities for the sustainable development that we see on the right. It will be a major enabler. When you have the digital twin, when you have information of our Earth, of our surroundings, And this will, of course, be enabled by new devices where we have higher frequencies. We can really touch the environment virtually and get all kind of useful information and create this digital twin. And that will, of course, enable then all kinds of optimizations and green solutions. Good. So I already mentioned RNI has started, as also in other regions of the world. 6G RNI has started. We have this called Hexa-X flagship that is quite important in terms of overall concept, and also very promising exploratory projects that are currently running. So that was this bridging phase is ongoing, and then we're now launching under 6G SNS the first initiatives. That has two pillars, also accelerate some programs for deployment. So like really commercial deployments where there is market failure to really fill market gaps. And then, of course, the R&I, research and innovation, the 6G vision, that was the other important pillar. What is important here that we have an upfront commitment of 900 million euros in law. That was important for investment certainty. We have close involvement of the member states, who also have important programs, by the way, so we need to coordinate there, and a dedicated program office. So this is how the work program looks like, 2021-22. The new one is expected soon, will look a bit similar because we, of course, have a roadmap and building on these streams, stream A, B, C, D that you see here in some continuity. But this will certainly mean that we also look at the gaps now from the project that we launch, and then also have some focus when we move forward. And then to conclude, also this is one important area that is linked, the so-called CHIPS Act that we adopted last year, and where we now also developing research and innovation. And this is certainly very relevant also for when we talk about for chips for 6G, where Europe has been a bit weak in the last years, where we also need to develop some more capacities, and this will be important to follow. So to conclude, we're in close contact with the Korean authorities also at government level, and we can expect, as we have in any way also overall a very good relationship between the two regions, that we can expect good cooperation. We're setting up certainly a cooperation framework, and also looking at opportunities now in the upcoming work program, where we can also then have possibility to have participation from Korean partners in our projects and on the other way around. So really looking forward to that. So that concludes my presentation, and I wish you a very successful event. Many thanks.